Thank you very much. Thank you for coming here this morning. I'm here today to turn fear and pessimism into optimism and courage about renewable energy and climate change. And I've really been waiting for this moment all my life. I grew up as a teenager in Southern California, and I remember seeing cars lined up to buy ration gasoline, limited to $5 per day. There were mile-long lines down Ventura Boulevard, and you could even only buy gasoline on odd or even numbered days based on the last digit of your license plate. And I looked at this and I said, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way to power our planet than taking limited resources out of the ground and rationing them, waiting in line for them. I was so passionate about this that I even started a small business called Solar Devices. I was 15 years old. I made little kits and plans to make little parabolic concentrators and little Stirling engines, and I sold them in the back of Popular Science and Scientific American for $4, and I sold 10,000 of them, so it actually paid my way through college. I really had a lot of fun doing that as a teenager. And I really wanted to do something to try and make it so that we could power our planet renewably. Well, fast forward 45 years. We're really on a terrible path. Every single day, every single one of us on Earth creates about 1 pound of trash. We create 1 pound of trash that we put in landfills, so 7 billion pounds of trash every day. However, every one of us creates 31 pounds of CO2 trash that we put up into the atmosphere. So we put 31 times as much stuff into the atmosphere as we put into our landfills. We don't see ourselves putting it up there, so we don't notice it, but it's really, really caused incredible consequences. For all of history, we've only had between about 0.02% or 0.03% CO2 in the atmosphere for 1 million years. This graph shows 1 million years of time, and it's always around 250 parts per million. Until the Industrial Revolution, and until 1900, you could see it taking off like a rocket ship. It's zoomed up, and we crossed 400 parts per million, or 0.04% just a few years ago, and now we're at 410. It's caused unbelievable consequences. The effects have been catastrophic. We've seen bigger fires, bigger droughts. We've seen bigger storms. We're seeing shorter winters. We're going to see much, much worse to come, all because of the CO2 that we're putting up in the atmosphere. And the problem is that the energy industry is sort of holding the Earth hostage. It's all of us who are using the energy, but the energy industry isn't paying any tax, isn't paying any price for putting all that CO2 up into the sky. We're basically using this thin sliver of the atmosphere as our landfill. We're putting all that up there. All those tons of CO2 are going up as if it were going into a landfill. And we're warming the planet by doing that. And the additional warming that we're causing to the Earth by that layer of CO2 in the atmosphere is equivalent to 3 Hiroshima bombs every second. 3 Hiroshima bombs every second is how much extra heat we're bringing to the Earth because we're using the atmosphere as our landfill for CO2. It's absolutely unbelievable what we're doing to the Earth. It's only going to get worse because everyone on the planet wants to live like us. If you take the 15 terawatts that the planet uses, there's 15 terawatts of energy that all of us on Earth use. If you divide that by the 7.5 billion people, that's 2,000 watts per person. Everybody on Earth is using 2,000 watts all day long to power the comfort of our lives. However, all of us in this room, we're probably using 10 times that. We're probably using 20,000 watts, those of us here, because of our lifestyle, because of our devices, because of the lighting, because of the air conditioning, because of heating, because of plane travel. So we're using a much, much higher proportion of the energy of the world than the rest of the world is using, and they all want to live like us. That's going to lead us to need 50 terawatts by 2050. So the 15 terawatts the planet uses today is going to need 50 terawatts by 2050. But there's some good news. So far, I've given you the bad news. The good news is the very same sun that's heating up the Earth because of the CO2 we're putting in the atmosphere gives us 1,000 times all the energy we need. All of humanity, all of civilization, sun provides 1,000 times as much energy as that every single day. And the sun is the most uniformly distributed natural resource. It's everywhere. So if we can harness that cost effectively, we can finally make a difference and stop that increasing CO2 into the atmosphere. We have 3 hurdles to cross to move completely from fossil fuels to renewables. And thankfully, we've already crossed the first 2. I'm going to tell you about those first 2 hurdles and the third one that we have yet to cross, but we're very close to. The very first hurdle was making a renewable power plant cheaper than a new fossil fuel plant. think about all the plants that are being built right now. When you build a new fossil fuel plant, could you build a renewable plant cheaper than that? And actually, starting in 2015, we were able to do that. And there's two reasons for it. The first reason was huge sustained investment. We've been investing $300 billion a year for the last 10 years to drive down the price of these renewables. The second reason is that led to dramatic cost reduction. Wind power went down by a factor of 20 times. Solar panels went down by a factor of 200 times. 200 times. Two things caused that. One was policy, and one was technology. The technological advances drove down the price, but policy played a very important role. And actually, Germany was the leader in that policy. And the planet has a lot of thanks to give to Germany for the policies that were put in place that helped drive down the price 200 times of PV panels in the last several decades. So right now, starting in 2015, new wind and solar became cheaper than new anything else. You finally could build a new power plant with wind and solar cheaper than a fossil fuel plant. That happened in 2015. That was the first major hurdle in the history of renewable energy that was crossed in 2015. That has led to exponential growth. You've seen an exponential growth of PV installations around the world, exponential growth of wind power, and the gigawatt growth that we've seen is everywhere. It's global. It's in Japan, it's in Germany, it's in the United States, it's in Italy, it's in China, and the rest of the world, even faster growth in those places, because the rest of the world that doesn't have infrastructure is putting in renewables at a very, very fast clip. Okay, the second hurdle. The second hurdle was making a renewable power plant cheaper than an existing fossil fuel plant, one that was already been amortized. So a coal or natural gas plant that's already been paid for. Could we ever make renewables cheaper than that? Well, we actually crossed that at the end of last year. At the end of last year, we can now make a solar plant or a wind plant for cheaper than an already amortized fossil fuel plant. That's a huge hurdle that we just crossed. So now new wind and solar are cheaper than existing fossil fuel plants. So renewables have won, but at the wrong time of day. If you take a look at the different prices of different types of fossil fuels and renewables, diesel-generated electricity costs 10 cents a kilowatt hour, coal plants cost 6 cents a kilowatt hour. The most efficient combined cycle gas plants, like from GE and from Siemens, only cost 5 cents. That's why combined cycle gas plants are taking over from coal. There's no policy that can keep coal in business when you can beat the price of it with natural gas plant, and natural gas is taking over. But wind is only 3 cents, and solar is only 2 cents. So you might say, what's the problem? Well, the problem is the sun shines in the afternoon and the wind blows at night, not necessarily matching when people need the power. This is a graph of how the energy is delivered and when it's needed. The orange curve is the curve of solar, peaking at noon. The blue curve is the demand curve, peaking around 7 p.m. So if there's too much solar at noon and you can't use it, you have to throw it away. That's called curtailment. That's extra power that you can't even use. And that's happening in places around the world now as they have more and more renewable installations. So what we need to do is have a way to take that energy from the wrong time of day and bring it to the right time of day. When we can finally do that, that would be the third hurdle. So that's the third hurdle, low-cost storage. A solution to store energy, which when added to the price of renewables, still is cheaper than fossil fuels. That's when we really can have renewable energy truly power the whole planet. So let me tell you what we have to do to get there. There's only 3 major ways to store energy: chemically, with batteries of all types; thermally, with hot or cold storage; or mechanically, with gravity or compressed air. The cost of storing energy is much more than the cost of generating energy. This is a graph of all the costs of storing energy. You can see that flywheels cost 45 cents a kilowatt hour, flow batteries are 28 cents, lithium-ion batteries are down to 25 cents and going down because of all the investment that's made for automotive use of lithium-ion batteries. The cheapest type of storage in the world is pumped hydro. That's basically gravity storage, pumping water up a mountain and letting it flow back down to get the energy back. That has been used up. Basically everywhere on Earth where there's a mountain with a reservoir above and a reservoir below, someone has bought that land and turned it into pumped hydro because it's so cost effective. But even that is too expensive. What we need to do is get to the tipping point of 3 cents. 3 cents is the magic number, because if you take 3 cents and add it to 2 cents, then you can beat fossil fuels. So that's where we need to get. So we now need to devote the same amount of attention to storage that we devoted to energy generation for the last several decades. Pumped hydro is currently the cheapest, but we need to beat it by a factor of 5. So there's billions of dollars being spent on all of these areas. Tesla and 100 other companies are working like crazy to build cheaper batteries. Google X just spun out a company called Malta, a company that Bill Gates invested in, which is helping driving down the cost of thermal storage. And Idealab, my company, just spun out a company called Energy Vault. We've developed an innovative gravity storage system that can compete with pumped hydro, being much, much less expensive. But the only way we're going to win in this battle against fossil fuels is with technological innovation and lots of computational power to make up for all the fuel. So let me tell you about what Energy Vault is. It's a tower that is built by a computer-controlled crane. It's pictured in the front. 35-ton cement blocks are lifted up to build the tower, and then they're lowered back to the ground to get the energy back. It's 5 times cheaper than batteries and 4 times cheaper than pumped hydro. So we're very, very close to that magic tipping point. It's like pumped hydro. It's a 30-story building made out of these concrete blocks, but it doesn't need water, doesn't need a river, doesn't need a dam. We're basically building the building every day and lowering it every day to get the energy back. It uses much less cement than a dam. A dam uses 1,500 cubic meters of concrete per megawatt. This only uses 500 cubic meters of concrete per megawatt. So it's much, much more efficient. It stores 35 megawatt hours. It costs $7 million. And on the left, you can see how it works. It starts with a bunch of blocks near the ground. And during the day, they get lifted up when the sun is shining or when the wind is blowing. And then they get lowered back down as you need the energy, as there's demand on the grid. We developed a custom 6-arm crane with Ainge in Italy. And we work with GE on the motor generators. We developed a low-cost cement block with Cemex. Cemex has their world research headquarters in Zurich, and we work with them to come up with a way to make a heavy cement block, which is very cheap, and actually can use recycled aggregate material in the block. So we get 2 things out of that. We avoid putting materials into landfills because we use it in the bricks, and then we avoid putting CO2 in the atmosphere because we're lifting these blocks to store the energy alongside renewable electricity. So now the cost of storing energy. The same graph I showed you before, but Energy Vault is now at 3.5 cents. So we're within a half a cent of that magic number to be able to pull off cheaper than all fossil fuels. Right now, Energy Vault at 3.5 cents plus 2 cents solar, that's already cheaper than coal. With another half a cent, we can be cheaper than natural gas. Lowest cost. Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I share the enthusiasm for this. It's so exciting to be able to finally make this kind of impact on renewable energy. We just announced this in the fall. Each of these units are 35 megawatt hours and cost $7 million. We have orders for 1,000 units in a few months. So $7 billion of demand from around the world for this. We're so excited to try and get this out there as fast as we can. We clear this third hurdle of storage when renewable energy plus storage is less than the lowest cost fossil fuels in the world. The reason for optimism around renewable energy is that low-cost storage will finally replace fossil fuels with clean energy. We really, really can make this difference. We must do it in the next decade. We really have to realize this goal. We're truly on the cusp, but we need lots more investment, lots more courage to continue to invent. I'd love to continue the discussion with all of you here and find more ways to help bring this to the world. But mostly what I want to say is this. When I was a teenager, 15 years old, there were 325 parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere. Today, there's 410. If we make this difference in the world, we can go back to that number and give to our children and grandchildren the exact same world that we came into. I really hope we can do that together. Thank you very much for the great audience.